all signs are pointing to the fact that Jamaica is on the brink of a major oil discovery. The data is stronger than ever. Major oil companies are looking to cash in, but is this another false hope? Because after years of searching with no results, Jamaicans are not so sure. But now, in 2025, something is different, because for the first time in over 40 years, Jamaica might actually be closer than ever to finding oil. Closer than most Jamaicans realize. This is not a wild guess. This is based on a carefully built conclusion, based on years of exploration, billions of dollars in data, and a government strategy that is finally showing results. Now, today, I'm going to be diving into why Jamaica's decades-long quest for oil might be about to pay off, and what it could mean for the country's economy, its politics, and the environment. Now, let's rewind just a bit. Jamaica's search for oil isn't new. In fact, it goes back to the 1950s. Now, over the years, there have been at least 11 signs of oil in both offshore and onshore areas. But these early signs have never led to commercial discovery, and most people just gave up. Then in 2014, things took a turn. Tullow Oil, a UK-based energy company with experience in frontier oil exploration, they signed a deal with the Jamaican government to explore a massive area south of the island known as the Walton-Morant Basin. Now, this basin covers 22,000 square kilometers and had never been studied before. Now, over the next few years, Tullow carried out seismic surveys mapping the geological layers beneath the seabed, and what they found was very promising. In 2017, a local fisherman reported an oil slick near the Pedro Bank, and scientists investigated and confirmed that live oil was seeping through the ocean floor. Now, that was the first time Jamaica had physical proof that oil was there. Now, this led to the first ever 3D seismic survey offshore Jamaica in 2018. Now, using a high-tech vessel called Polarcos Adira, Tullow scanned a smaller section of the Walton-Morant Basin, identifying several oil prospects. The most exciting one, a structure named Colibri, which may hold up to 400 million barrels of oil. But then, just as things were heating up, Tullow pulled out. And that's because global oil prices were falling, and the company decided that it needed to cut costs. Now, they handed their 80% stake to a smaller company called United Oil and Gas, and then they just walked away. Now, most people would have thought that that would be the end of the story, but United Oil and Gas, better known as UOG or the OG, they weren't ready to give up. They took over the license in 2020, and they became the sole operator of the Walton-Morant Basin. And since then, they've been quietly but aggressively working behind the scenes to de-risk the project, attract new investors, and move closer to drilling Jamaica's first offshore oil well in more than 40 years. In 2024, the government of Jamaica granted UOG a license extension, giving them until 2026 to start their drilling. Then, just months ago, in March 2025, the government granted yet another extension, this time until January 2028. Now, this might seem like some kind of delay, but it's actually signs of progress. Why, you might ask? Because UOG has already completed all the seismic work. They've got the data, they've identified the prospects, and they're now negotiating with major oil companies confidentially under non-disclosure agreements to bring in a partner who has the resources to drill. Jamaica's geology is in the right neighborhood. Just look around. Guyana is just a few hundred miles to the south of Jamaica. That went from 0 to 11 billion barrels of oil in under a decade. The same tectonic forces that created their oil basin extends into Jamaica's offshore waters. It's not just copy and paste, but the similarities are enough to raise eyebrows in the boardrooms and ministries alike. Now, experts say drilling a deep water offshore well could cost around $30 million. Now, that's why UOG needs a bigger partner. But if that partnership is secured, many believe that it's just a matter of time, and Jamaica could see a drill ship in its waters by 2026 or 2027. In other words, Jamaica is closer than it has ever been to finding oil. United Oil and Gas says the discussions are ongoing, and that tells you something. Big oil is circling. While I don't want us to get ahead of ourselves, let's have a think about what this could actually mean if oil is discovered in Jamaica. Let's start with the economy. Now, Jamaica is currently a net importer of oil. Every year, the country spends hundreds of millions of US dollars on petroleum products. Finding oil at home could drastically reduce that cost. It would also improve energy security and strengthen the Jamaican dollar. And even more importantly, oil production could bring in massive amounts of government revenue. And according to United Oil and Gas, if the Walton-Morant Basin contains just a fraction of the estimated 2.4 billion barrels of oil, the potential economic value could reach in the tens of billions of US dollars. That's the kind of money that could help Jamaica to pay down its debt, invest in infrastructure, fund schools, hospitals, and accelerate development across the entire island. The potential upside here is enormous. Guyana, for example, went from being one of the poorest countries in South America to having one of the fastest growing economies in the world after oil was discovered in 2015. Now, some analysts believe that Jamaica could follow a similar path on a smaller scale, but still a transformational scale. Jamaica's leaders are staying cautious. Government ministers have made it clear they're not making any promises. They're not banking on oil, and they're warning the Jamaican people to keep their expectations realistic. Now, Minister Obin Hill, he said earlier this year, if we find oil in Jamaica, then God bless us. But we must continue to build the economy in other ways. This is a careful approach which is meant to prevent what some countries call the resource curse. This is where too much dependence is placed on oil, which leads to corruption, inflation, and long-term economic damage. There's also the question of who gets the benefit. If Jamaica does strike oil, I want to hear from you. Who do you think will benefit? Do you think the wealth will be shared equally? Will local businesses get contracts? Will young Jamaicans get trained for jobs in the oil industry? Let me know in the comments. These are the questions that the government should already be thinking about. I think the government should also be thinking about creating a sovereign wealth fund similar to what Norway and Guyana have done to ensure that the oil revenues are saved and used wisely. Then, what about the environment? That is one of the biggest concerns for many environmental groups, and rightfully so, because offshore drilling carries a lot of risk. A major oil spill could harm coral reefs, fishing grounds, and tourism. Jamaica's marine ecosystem are among the most precious in the Caribbean, and one accident could have devastating consequences. Now, that's why I think the government should require a full environmental impact before any drilling begins. They need to also ensure that United Oil and Gas commits to international best practices, and agencies like NEPA should be watching their every step. But the truth is, even with these precautions, one mistake could cost Jamaica more than they stand to gain. Now, in the end, the question isn't just whether Jamaica can find oil. The real question is, if oil is found, can the country manage it wisely by balancing the economic rewards with the political responsibility and the environmental risk? Now look, one thing is certain. For the first time in decades, Jamaica isn't just dreaming about oil. The data is real, the prospects are mapped, and the government is engaged, and a company is actively working to make it happen. Could Jamaica be close to finding oil? Let me know what you think in the comments. I think yes, they could be closer than they've ever been before. The country continues to wait with cautious optimism for what could be one of the most significant discoveries in its modern history.